It all began with a scream, a dry, ragged sound that split the morning silence of the shelter Havenwood and unleashed chaos. Two volunteers they left running. They barely managed to see a black and brown shadow cross the yard at full speed, like a living stain with bulging eyes and white saliva pouring from the mouth. Another kennel was destroyed, another cage twisted by the brute force, and in half from disaster, always he, Rex. Nobody achieved approach that dog had picked up weeks. Earlier, wandering through the smoldering remains of a burned-out house, with pieces of ash stuck to the back and a melted chain still hanging from its neck. From his arrival, the orders were clear. Do not enter his cage. He is aggressive, impossible to tame. He had bitten a coach, jumped fences, destroyed beds, water bowls, walls. But that tomorrow something was different. Instead of fury in his eyes, there was something deeper, pain. Maya, one of the new volunteers, stayed paralyzed. In front of the fence, watching as the employees rushed to sedate him for the fourth time in 10 days. Hours later, when his shelter was left silently, she returned alone. She sat in front of the cage with the legs crossed, opened a small jar of peanut butter and he left her a few inches from the bars. "I don't think you're bad. I think you have fear," he murmured, without waiting for a reply. Up to date next, Maya sat back down in the same place. He made no noise. He didn't try touch it. It was just there, breathing calmly, letting the time would speak. So it was did also he third day. And the room. Meanwhile, Rex continued being a demon for all others, barked with fierceness, showed the teeth, lashed out at those who were passing by. But with she was different. She didn't come close, but she didn't either. Reacted, simply watched. That silent bond was repeated for weeks, until one morning Maya arrived with someone else. Your daughter Lily, a girl small, about 7 years, which seemed bring with you a piece of sun in the soul. The girl bent down in front of the cage, took out of her backpack a children's drawing, a dog surrounded by a great red heart, and it held up, smiling. "It's for you," he said in a sweet voice. Rex didn't move at first. He didn't even growl. Neither he barked. But then, almost imperceptibly, he lay down in the ground, with the head on its paws, as if that small voice had crossed something very deep in he. From that moment on, something changed. When Maya arrived each morning, she would find Rex lying next to the drawing, as if he were guarding it. He didn't let anyone touch it, nor that they will take out of their sight, and if someone came too close, it would show the teeth. But the paper was still intact, without a single mark. It was his treasure. Maya decided not to push. Sometimes spoke, others sometimes I just breathed next to him. And Lily, when he would go, sit at a safe distance and counted made-up stories. Rex seemed listen, motionless, with the eyes fixed on the girl as if every word you gave a little piece. One day, Lily brought your favorite stuffed animal, a rag bear with a broken ear, and it left in front of the cage, right next to the drawing. Nobody thought Rex I would accept it. But not only that, accepted. It took gently, and lay down with him between his paws, as if protecting something fragile. That gesture so small made cry to one of the caregivers, because for the first time, Rex didn't seem a wild animal. It looked like a soul in mourning, learning trust again. If you have ever seen something like this, tell us in the comments. We want to read your story also. The weeks passed, and the bond between Rex and Lily grew stronger. Although continued being unpredictable with adults, with she became increasingly calm. She even allowed me to take pictures of her through the bars, and once, very slowly, she approached his snout to his hand without bite it. Maya decided it was time to try. She opened the cage with caution and sat inside, several meters away from him. Rex did not react with violence, only the watch. She didn't move. She didn't search, caress him. He just let the silence speak. So they began the sessions inside the cage, where Maya and Lily spent hours reading to him stories, drawing, or just being present. Little by little, the fear was yielding, and in its place appeared something similar to the curiosity. Sometimes Rex watched pencils move. Other times, he approached enough to sniff the Maya's shoes. Nobody had forced. Everything was at his pace, and it was that respect, that patience, which is what was healing. The real one breaking point. It happened one rainy afternoon. The shelter was almost empty due to a thunderstorm, and Maya had arrived soaked, with a broken umbrella and the lilies drawing carefully protected under his coat. He entered the cage without think about it much, sat down as always, and Rex her noticed with a different intensity. After a few minutes, he approached slowly, very slowly. Maya held back the breathing. The dog sniffed, went down the head, and without warning rested his snout in his lap. It was the first time I touched someone voluntarily own. Maya didn't move. Tears rolled down her cheeks on their own. Outside, the thunder shook his sky. Inside the cage, a silent miracle was happening. Rex stayed there, breathing with she, as if that closeness relieved him, as if the warmth of his body was the first real comfort he had felt in a while years. Since that day, something unlocked. He began to let Maya caress him, first briefly, then more often. And if Lily was present, she would even move a little tail. The others in his shelter began to notice the change. Some didn't, believed. Others, they said, it was an illusion passenger, but those who they saw with their own eyes, they knew it was real. Maya proposed take it to the closed patio to see how reacted out of his cage. It was a risk, but Rex came out, without leash, walking beside her, calm, as if the world were not so threatening if it was with his new pack. Played with a ball for the first time. He rolled around in the wet grass. Lily ran after him, and although Maya kept always a safe distance, the dog never showed signs of aggression. On the contrary, he seemed happy, as if I would have remembered what it was like to be a dog, what it was like to be alive without fear. That afternoon, the employees of the shelter, they took photos, recorded videos, and they shared on networks. In less than a day, the story of the irredeemable dog who trusted again went viral. If this part touched you, maybe it's time to follow our page. Stories like this deserve to be shared. With the viralization, they arrived the comments, the messages, requests. Some they wanted adopted, others just applauded the bravery of Maya and Lily. But for Maya there was no doubts. Rex was already part of his family. All that was missing, make it official. It began he adoption process with he refuge, presented all the papers, and after an evaluation strict, he gave the approval. The day he signed the documents, Lily cried with emotion. "Now you are ours forever," he told her. He whispered in my ear while it hugged. Rex, who would have previously reacted with fear, he stood still, leaning his snout in his shoulder of the girl. It was a ceremony without witnesses, without pomp, but with the weight of a profound decision. From that day, Rex slept in the carpet of the Lily's room, ate in a blue plate with his name, and learned the sounds of the home, laughter, cartoons, Maya's voice singing while cooked. And although he continued to show certain fears, especially with noises, strong or unexpected visitors, it was another dog, more serene, more present, more his own. One afternoon, months later, someone touched the door of the house. It was a man older, thin, with cane, eyes sunken, and a photograph framed between her hands. She asked for Rex. She said he was her ancient owner, that it had raised him since he was a puppy, that the house that burned down was his. Maya invited him in. The man sat down silently, looking at the dog sleeping at Lily's feet. "I'm not here to take it away. I just wanted to see him one more time, know that he's okay." When Rex, he sniffed, tensed for a moment. Then he came closer, with caution, recognized in some corner of his memory. But it didn't jump on him. It didn't lick. Neither it rejected. Simply it looked, walked to his favorite corner, took a drawing of Lily among the teeth, and lay down next to the stuffed animal. It was his way of saying, "Thanks, but I don't need you anymore. I'm where I belong." The old man smiled sadly. "I guess you found your new home." From then on, life with Rex was a mix of routines and small surprises. I accompanied Lily to the school, always waiting for the other side of the fence with patience. He slept at her feet when toward the task. He would bark if anyone approached too quickly, but beyond everything, it was clear that they loved with fierce loyalty. One afternoon, while Lily was reading in the garden, Rex lay down next to her and leaned the head on his leg. Maya, seeing them through the window, knew this wasn't just a rehabilitated dog anymore. He was family. Rex's transformation inspired others' families to adopt animals with stories difficult. The shelter began to receive more requests, more visits, more people interested in help, and all thanks to a bond that was born of silence, of respect, of unconditional tenderness. Maya never did it searched. He never thought he'd end up raising a dog like Rex. But sometimes, the ones who need love the most are those who know the least ask for it. Do you know someone who needs read this? Send him this text with "Dear, so occurred it, unthinkable." One grey Saturday, Lily went alone to the library neighborhood, as he did every weekend. He promised return before lunch, but hours passed, and he didn't come back. Maya, desperate, called the library, neighbors, the police. Nobody knew where was. It was Rex who, seeing the chaos, began to act. He sniffed his backpack, he ran toward the door and barked with insistence. Maya understood his message, took the strap, but the ignored. He left in a hurry without looking back. He continued as best he could, through streets, alleys, parks, until, after more than an hour, saw stop next to a small vacant lot. There, among bushes and trash, was Lily, shivering, with a wound in the knee, scared but alive. Seeing her, Maya ran to hug. Her Rex didn't bark, he just sat beside her, as if he knew she was already there was complement his mission. The story spread like wildfire, first in a neighborhood, then in social media. "Rescued dog saves missing girl," they said, the headlines. The news locals went to interview them. Lily, still with the bandaged knee, spoke of Rex as if he were his brother major. "He always knows where I am. He always takes care of me." Maya said how it all began with a jar of peanut butter and a lot of it patience. But what most moved those who they heard it was not the heroic act in yes, but the story behind. The dog that was found in ashes, which no one wanted to approach, and that was now a guardian, a symbol of what can occur when someone go beyond of the fear. Animal welfare organizations began to contact them. They wanted to use the Rex's story to inspire new ones' adoption campaigns. And although Maya never sought notoriety, he accepted, with one condition, that everything raised will help rescue more animals with stories like his. Was just as it was born, the idea. Lily, with his naivety so natural, it was who it suggested, "What if we help other Rex?" Maya smiled, thinking it was a girl's fantasy. But with the time, that idea was taking shape. They began to visit shelters, give talks, and share their experiences in schools and fairs. Rex's photos with his drawing and his stuffed animal became icons of a new campaign. Everyone deserves a second chance. One day, a volunteer from the original refuge for them showed a letter written by a family who had adopted a pit bull with a history of assault. He said, "I don't we would have made without know the Rex's story." Maya cried, not because she was looking for recognition, but because she understood that transformation, that silent miracle that occurred between her daughter, and a broken dog, was touching many more lives than she imagined. The bond between Lily and Rex became so stronger than many. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Just by looking at each other, they understood each other. There were nights in which the little girl I woke up from a nightmare, and before I could call his mother, Rex already was next to his bed, supporting his snout on the mattress. In the birthday, it was the first in receive the slice of cake without sugar. In the vacation, they took to the beach, and he ran as if he were a puppy again, But the time, inevitably, began to leave marks. Rex began to walk more slowly. He had trouble climbing stairs. Some mornings, he no longer got up with the same enthusiasm. The veterinarian confirmed what everyone feared. It was aging faster than expected, perhaps due to trauma or years of abuse. Maya gently groomed Lily, but little girl already it knew. No matter how much time fit her, I just want her to be happy, he said, caressing her head while he slept on a blanket. And he was happy, until the last day. The morning of his farewell was peaceful. The sun came through the window, illuminating the corner where Always was resting. Lily knelt beside him, with the original drawing in one hand and the stuffed animal in the another. Rex, with the breathing already weak, he barely moved his tail when he saw her. Maya sat on the other side, silently, and he thanked her. "You taught us more than many humans," he said, when Rex closed the eyes for the last time. He did it surrounded by love, peace, and purpose. There was no crying in that moment, just a deep calm, as if everyone understood that their story did not end there. It was the end of a cycle, yes, but also the beginning of something bigger, because the echo of your transformation would continue resonating a lot after his departure. After the goodbye, the house felt strange, silent. Maya was crying in the corners without Lily seeing her. And Lily, although I tried to continue, with his routine sometimes stopped in the middle of a sentence, as if looking for Rex with the look. The corner where he slept remained intact. The blanket, the drawing, and the stuffed animal, now older, but just as meaningful. Weeks passed like this, until a day, while they were walking through the park and saw a dog tied to a fence with a note that said, "We can't take care of him anymore." He was small, skinny, and had an anxious look on his face. Lily bent down and noticed in silence, and then looked at her mother. No need to say anything. Maya blurted out a long sigh and smiled. "Let's go home," he said, untying the rope. That gesture wasn't about replacing Rex. It was about honoring him, because everything they had learned he couldn't stay still. He had to keep going. That was the beginning of his project, a small family foundation dedicated to rescuing, rehabilitating, and rehoming dogs with emotional trauma. They called it Rex's Refuge. They started with minimal resources, volunteering, donations from neighbors, and much more personal effort. Maya was in charge of the procedures and therapies with the animals. Lily, although young, had a special connection with the difficult dogs. I knew when to approach, when to retreat, when to just sit in silence. With time, your history inspired more people. Veterinarians, trainers, and others volunteers joined. In less than a year, they had rescued more than 30 animals, many of which had been discarded by other shelters. Each one carried Rex's legacy in his process: patience, love, respect, and all, without exception, they came out transformed, as if a part of him still will guide them. If you got this far, prove it was worth it. The pain. Please share, comment, or share this history. As the project grew toward the Lily's story. The girl who had once given a drawing of a scared dog became a symbol of a generation that understood that animals were not objects or problems to be solved. They were beings with emotions, memories, and wounds. During his school years, he presented projects on canine emotional rehabilitation, visited Congress's youth, and was even invited to a local television program where she shared how Rex had changed his life. Always, he carried with him the original drawing, now framed, and the stuffed animal sewn several times. This reminds me that sometimes what scares us the most is what needs love the most, he said as he showed it. Words were simple, but they impacted everyone, and little by little, that philosophy began to influence others as well. Shelters, which implemented similar pre-adoption cohabitation programs, inspired by the Maya and Lily's methodology. With the years, Lily matured, but never strayed from her purpose. As she turned 18, decided study vet with a focus on animal behavior. His mother, although he was afraid that the world would turn off, that fire, the support without doubt. Everything you do, take your soul. Don't let anyone extinguish it, he said he, day in which Lily went to live in the city university student, carrying a box with her with photos of Rex, adoption documents passed, and a notebook full of ideas. In his bedroom hung one photo in particular, that of Rex lying next to the drawing and the stuffed animal, with the eyes closed and the sun illuminating him, his snout. It was his beacon, his route, your constant reminder of why that had chosen that one way. Because although the world outside complex and demanding, she had seen with his own eyes as love could rebuild what seemed broken forever. In the university, Lily did not pass unnoticed. His way of talking about the animals was not just technical, it was deeply human. While his companions focused in diagnoses and protocols, he spoke of looks, of times, of respect for fear. Some teachers, they looked with skepticism at first, but soon they began to listen to her with more attention. In one of his classes, he proposed a pilot project to accompany aggressive dogs with volunteers who will not train them, but just be with them. At first, no one understood logic, but it only took a week for several dogs to begin showing signs of calming. It's not magic, Lily explained. It's presence. The program expanded to the adoption center. Close, and to everyone's surprise, the adoption rates increased 30% in just 3 months. What I'd learned with Rex didn't just work, it transformed lives, and not just the dogs. Maya, from home, followed every step with pride. The shelter continued active, although now more structured, with full-time professionals and more support financial. But nothing replaced Lily's visits. Every time she returned, the dogs recognized as if he had never left. One in particular, a large and unsociable mestizo who didn't let anyone touch him. Lay down beside him first time she sat down in his space. This one has something of Rex in it, he said to his mother, while they watched from afar. And maybe it was true, or maybe it was her who had learned to see what many didn't notice. Because by now, Lily wasn't just helping dogs heal, she was also helping people change the way they looked at, to understand that behind every bark there is a story, that no being becomes aggressive without reason, and that, with enough patience, even the most damaged hearts can trust again. Has an animal ever changed your life? Share how your experience may inspire others. Rex's legacy began to take on a life of its own. It was no longer just a viral story or an intimate memory. It became in a model. Some they called it the Rex method. Others simply they spoke of the Lily effect. The shelters that implemented this new form of coexistence prior to the adoption, they reported not only fewer returns, but also deeper transformations in animals previously considered hopeless cases. A magazine specializing in animal welfare dedicated an entire edition to the phenomenon, with the image of Rex in the cover and a headline that read, "The dog who taught everyone to wait." Maya read in silence, with a mixture of emotion and nostalgia. Each article, each testimony, was an echo of the process that she and her daughter had lived. And although Rex was no longer there, his presence continued moving things, small and large, like a stone, in water that never stops creating waves. Meanwhile, Lily was moving forward in their studies. In his second year, was selected to do an internship in an international center for animal behavior. There, surrounded by experts, she felt for the first time that her life experience had the same weight as any scientific theory. In a session, he presented Rex's case with all the details, from your initial behavior until its link with his drawing and the stuffed animal. When he finished, one of the specialists approached and he said, "You have not rescued a dog alone. You have changed the way many of us view the rehabilitation." That phrase was left recorded, not out of vanity, but for confirmation, because so many times there was doubted, felt afraid of not being up to par, of romanticizing too much the process. But there, in front of professionals from around the world, he understood that a tenderness also, it may be science, that love also, it can be method. The internship you opened doors, but also wounds. At one of the centers visited, Lily met a German shepherd very similar to Rex. Same color, same deep gaze, but with wounds visible in the skin and in the soul. His name was Thor. He was locked in an isolated cage, considered a hopeless case because of his history of seizures. Lily asked permission to observe it. It happened days sitting in front of her cage, without talking. Into him, just breathing. The employees didn't understand that did. Some mocked. Others they said he was losing time. But she knew what he did. He wasn't looking for immediate results. He was looking for connection. After a week, Thor no longer growled at the sight of her. He would stay still. On the 10th day, he accepted a rag ball. The next day, 15, the let sit inside the cage. Nobody it had achieved before, and when she caressed his loin for the first time, not it, did with euphoria. He acted as if touching a wound, knowing it still hurts, because the important thing wasn't taming him. It was teaching him that he no longer had to defend himself from everyone. That case marked a before and a after. The center where Thor was decided to reformulate his rehabilitation protocol, Lily was invited to collaborate in the design of the new spaces, with observation areas, calm areas, and supervised visits by volunteers trained in silent presence. The proposal, was not revolutionary because it was complex, but because on the contrary, it was simple, accessible, human, and it worked. While all that had happened, Maya continued managing her Rex's shelter, which now counted with support from Foundations International. They received donations, trained new caregivers, and even offered educational programs for schools. Neither mother nor daughter had planned to arrive so far away. They just wanted to save a dog, but the history there was grown by a countone, and although they both missed Rex every day, they knew that their absence was not empty. It was a root that continued to bear fruit. In her last year of college, Lily decided to do his thesis on emotional memory in rescued dogs. It was not based solely on theories, but in more than 50 documented cases in her Rex's shelter, interviewed adopters, analyzed behaviors, and recorded hours of silent interactions between volunteers and animals with severe trauma. One of the most powerful chapters were the one who dedicated to the emotional symbology, how seemingly simple objects, such as a child's drawing or a stuffed animal, they can become in anchors effective that helps the animal feel safe. He said the history of the drawing of Lily, which Rex cared for until her last day. He included a photograph of that same drawing, now yellowish by the years old, but intact. Its final presentation was given a standing ovation. A professor, he said, "Your work is not just academic, it is deeply human, and that it does priceless." Lily, though excited, only thought in return to the shelter and continue working, because for her, every academic achievement only had meaning if it was transformed into something useful for those who had no voice. After finishing her studies, Lily returned to her hometown with a clear purpose. Together with Maya, they reformulated the entire structure of the Rex shelter, expanded the facilities, added consulting rooms, a small library with educational materials, and a play area therapeutic for the animals. They also created a space commemorative, a circular garden with a bronze sculpture of a German shepherd lying next to a child's drawing and a stuffed animal. It didn't have a license plate names, just one sentence: "Thank you for teaching us to wait." Every time someone new I arrived at the shelter, I passed by first for that one garden, and without need for many explanations, I understood what it was about. That place. It wasn't a rescue site, it was a place of hope, where every broken story found time, space, and hands willing to accompany his repair. The impact of the refuge soon became known. Borders, a European NGO dedicated to animal welfare, became interested in replicating the model in other cities of the world. Lily was invited to give lectures, to train teams, to share her approach. On one of those trips in Lisbon, she met Clara, a young canine therapist who worked with children in trauma situations. They quickly became friends and began collaborating on a pilot project that united rescued dogs with children victims of domestic violence. The results were surprising. Lily remembered how Rex calmed down with his presence, how his wounds emotional responded to a girl's soft voice. And now I saw its same repeat itself over and over again with other dogs and others' children. Some who did not speak began to read out loud while stroking the back of his furry companion. Others who didn't want to sleep alone. They achieved this if the dog slept beside them. It was as if both child and animal were offering each other a tenderness that adults sometimes failed to provide. Clara and Lily presented the first results of the project at an international summit. The specialists were amazed by the emotional strength of the bonds formed in so little time. "This is more than therapy, it's encounter," said one of the speakers, and so on. This is how the Program Corazones was officially born, twins, an international network that united shelters, therapists and schools, based in beginning of the silent listening and the deep respect for wounded emotions. Lily wasn't looking for recognition, but I couldn't deny that I felt pride, not for her, for Rex, for everything that had emerged from that first gesture in front of a cage, sitting, waiting, not forcing. Sometimes she found herself thinking about that there would be past if there had not been returned alone that afternoon with the jar of peanut butter, and the answer was, with a smile, so none of this would exist. The years followed passing, and with the Rex's name became into a symbol of transformation. Many people came to the shelter just for having read his history or seen a documentary about it. Children with fear, adults with losses recent, families looking for a new way to love. Everyone found something in that place, something that went beyond the dogs. It was an atmosphere, a different way of being with it vulnerable. Maya, already with a grayer hair but the same glow in the eyes, was still present in every corner. He walked among the kennels, greeted the animals for their name, listened with attention to each new volunteer, and although he no longer ran like before, he was still the operating heart of the place. One afternoon, seeing a teenage girl sitting silently next to a shivering dog, he approached her and he said softly, "Don't be hurry. Sometimes all they need is for someone to stay." The young woman nodded, and without know it, he repeated the same promise that Maya had made years back. Lily, for her part, continued touring the world. It gave workshops, wrote articles, designed emotional support manuals for animals and humans, but every so often returned to the shelter. It didn't matter how many countries you will visit or how many auditoriums would fill. His place was there, in that circular garden where it all began. He would sit in front of Rex's sculpture, leave a flower, and then entered the main building as if he had never left. Each return was also a restart. I watched the new animals, read their stories, and looked for that dull shine on the eyes that so good knew. He never failed to get excited, because even though had passed many years and many things, there was one thing that did not change: the power of tenderness, the deep conviction that no being, no matter how damaged, is irrecoverable if someone takes the time to look with love. In one of those returns, Lily met Dante, an abandoned greyhound with severe separation anxiety. He would throw himself against fences, hurt himself trying to escape, and couldn't stand being alone. The caretakers were exhausted. They thought that perhaps it would be more compassionate, put him to sleep. But Lily asked time. It passed 3 sleeping for days in a row, on a mat out of his kennel. Don't let him. He spoke. He just stayed there. Dante, at the beginning, I was unaware his presence, then the watched. And finally, he began to sleep peacefully while she I read in a low voice. After a week, he allowed me to touch his loin. Then he went out into the courtyard with her without strap, and after a month walked alongside other dogs without showing any signs of stress. One of the volunteers, seeing them together, murmured, "She is like a bridge." And it was true. Lily didn't force anyone to cross. She just stayed of the other side, waiting with the arms open. That case that led to writing his first book, From Fear to the Bond, a collection of stories animal royals rescued and the people who decided to stay. It was not a manual nor an autobiography, but an open letter to those who, did you ever think it was too late? That it wasn't worth it? Worth a try. Included the Rex chapter, of course, but also Thor's, Dante's, and a girl, as with selective mutism that began to speak thanks to his bond with a blind dog called Star. The book was translated into several languages and used in volunteer training in multiple countries. But for Lily, the elderly recognition was another. A letter written by a 10-year-old girl years that said, "I want to be like you when grow up. I don't want to save animals. I want to listen to them." That phrase was enough for him to know that his message was arriving and that Rex's echo was still alive. With he passed of the time, the Rex's shelter became in a continental reference center. They were no longer just arriving animals of the region, but also from other countries, sent by organizations that knew that there was a last hope for cases considered impossible. They were created alliances with universities, emotional training programs for children in schools, rural, and even a line of illustrated educational materials where each character was based in a royal dog of the shelter. One of them, of course, was Rex. His history. It was adapted in an illustrated children's story that told as a scared dog found the value thanks to a girl's drawing. The book was distributed free of charge in pediatric hospitals and libraries. In a public reading, a child raised his hand and asked, "Is Rex still taking care of Lily?" And Maya, who was present, replied without doubt, "Always." Because in every decision they made, in every life they saved, Rex continued there, accompanying from some invisible place. One day, while they reviewed the adoption file, Maya found Rex's original file. It was yellowish, with handwritten notes that read, "Dangerous, not adoptable, neutered for safety, high risk." He held it in his hands for several minutes in silence, then he gave it to him, showed Lily who it read carefully. "And to think that if I hadn't sat down that afternoon, I would be the only thing left of him," he murmured. Maya nodded. The document was framed and placed next to one of the entrances to the shelter, as a reminder of how wrong diagnoses can be when there is no time nor love. Next to it, they placed a plaque that read, "Every soul deserves a second look." Since then, every time someone new arrived with fear or doubts, Maya them took that one corner. It didn't say a lot, just the left read the file out loud, and then they invited to meet the dogs. Always it worked. Autumn afternoon, Lily received an invitation to give a talk in the UN headquarters, in an event on animal welfare and emotional health. He hesitated at first. He had never sought visibility in that level. But Maya the encouraged, "If Rex taught you anything, it's that sometimes you have to be where your voice is most needed." This is how, in front of international leaders, researchers and activists, Lily told the story that it changed everything. He didn't use complex graphics, just an image, projected, Rex lying, next to his drawing and his stuffed animal. Then he was silent for a few seconds and said, "This is what saves lives, not the control, not punishment, not cages. What saves is tenderness, patience, the space to heal." The entire room remained in silence. No one moved. When it was over, many stood up, approached with tears in the eyes. Some shared stories own, others simply you gave the thank you. But there was a woman in particular, a firm-voiced diplomat, who he said, "Your story reminded me that not all is lost, that we can still educate through love." Back at the shelter, Lily found a surprise: Maya and the volunteers. They had prepared an intimate ceremony to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the shelter. There were flowers, candles, photographs, and above all, many people who had once adopted there and returned with her dogs. The garden memorial was full of visitors. Some cried, others, they laughed, all sharing anecdotes. Lily stopped in front of Rex's sculpture, now a little more worn by the time, and placed a white flower on it. He closed the eyes and felt the air fill with something bigger than her. It wasn't just memory, it was presence, as if Rex, in some corner of the wind, still were taking care of, still were accompanying him, and he knew with a calm certainty that he would never had lost. That anniversary was also the moment Lily made an important decision. Until then, there had been refused multiple publishing offers to write a complete biography about his history with Rex, but now felt it was time, not out of vanity, but out of legacy. He began to write for the nights, in a notebook that he carried everywhere. He didn't toward with hurry. Each chapter was a conversation with the past. I remembered the silences, the looks, the small gestures that transformed a feared dog into a symbol of love. Titled the book, The Dog Who Heard My Soul. It wasn't just about Rex, but about everyone who came after. From Maya, from the volunteers, of the children who found shelter between legs and tails. The book was published in year after and became a phenomenon. It was translated into more than 20 languages and adopted as a reading mandatory in training programs for caregivers, educators, and therapists, with a success. From the book, a new one emerged, wave of interest in the shelter. But Lily and Maya were clear. They didn't want to convert it in a show. They rejected reality shows and campaigns, commercials, and any proposal that would alter the essence of the place. It is not a sanctuary to be admired. It is a space to heal, they said. Instead, they agreed to open a small school within the shelter. There, they formed young people from different parts of the world in the emotional rehabilitation approach that they had developed. The program was demanding. It didn't teach how to train, but how to be, to observe, to wait. Some didn't endure and left, but those who stayed were transformed, and many, upon returning to their countries, founded new centers with the same philosophy. Thus, the grid grew up, and although the world continued full of wounds, each new refuge was like another seed of the garden that Rex had planted with your silence, your drawing, and his stuffed animal. In one of the classes inaugural of that school, Lily shared an anecdote she had never told publicly. She recalled one night, many years ago, when he still did not dare to enter Rex's cage. It was raining. He had fear. I just had 7 years, but something inside her, he said that he should to stay. He had sat down with the legs crossed, getting wet under the rain, just to be close. It wasn't bravery, he told his students. It was intuition. And that day I learned that the fear isn't always something you have to overcome. Sometimes you just have to go along with it. The room was in silence. Some took notes. Others simply absorbed every word. It was that way of speaking, so simple, so human, which made each of Lily's classes more than just theory. It was an invitation to see things differently, to feel differently, to be rather than do. Meanwhile, Maya began to delegate more tasks. Although continued active, knew it was time to prepare others. He appointed 2 young men volunteers as operational coordinators and began to document the entire process of the refuge, from its foundation to its challenges current. Each folder, each story, each protocol was written by hand, with annotations, personal and small phrases of his like, "Never underestimate a long silence," or "If you don't know what do, sit and wait." That archive was baptized as the Heart of the Shelter and was saved in the Central Library next to a copy of Lily's first drawing. One day, while organized the materials, a girl who had been adopted years ago by a family from the team came over and asked who it had been. Rex. Maya, the led to the garden. Commemoratively, they sat together and he told everything. The girl didn't interrupt, not once. In the end, he just said, "Me too want to help sad dogs." And Maya knew, without doubt, that the cycle would continue. With he passed of the time, letters began to arrive from different parts of the world. Some were of children, others of older adults. Many of people who once adopted a difficult dog thanks to the Rex's story. A woman wrote from Japan telling how his son with autism there was created a ribbon with a deaf bitch that no one wanted. A young man from Brazil recounted as there was left drugs after rescuing a pit bull that needed more than he needed himself same. And so, each letter was a confirmation that the story of that broken dog had crossed borders, cultures, languages. Lily and Maya read some meetings on Sunday afternoons, drinking tea in her porch of the shelter. No, it were not made out of nostalgia, but out of gratitude, because each story, new era and extension of the his, as if Rex, somehow, was still walking around the world, touching hearts from the other side of the time. In an interview many years after, they asked Lily what it had been the hardest thing of all way. She thought for a moment, went down the look, and replied, "Accept that there is wounds that we cannot heal, only accompany." Then smiled, but also understand that accompanying it is already a way to heal. That phrase went viral. It appeared in murals, books, t-shirts. But she didn't said to impress. He said because it was true. Sometimes the dogs didn't recover completely. Some lived with fear until the end. Others never accepted a caress. But even those, if they were accompanied with respect, they stopped suffering alone. And that was enough. It wasn't about endings happy. It was about shared paths, about not abandoning, about being, even if there is no guarantees. As Lily put it, was there for Rex. As Rex did was there for her. And, as both of them, they were there for so many others. One spring afternoon, as Lily strolled through the shelter, stopped in front of a new cage where he had just arrived, a dog with a downcast, scarred gaze in his snout. It was large, silent, and didn't allow anyone to get close. Looking at it, Lily felt a pang in the chest, not because reminded him of Rex, but because reminded her of her same in that first visit years ago. He sat down in the ground a few meters away, with a small notebook in his hands. He said nothing. He just drew a big dog, a little girl small and a heart between them. Then folded the paper. It left in front of the gate and left. The next day, the drawing continued there, untouched. But the dog was no longer hiding. He had come closer. And in his eyes, for the first time, there was something more than fear. There was curiosity. It was so when Lily understood that Rex's legacy was not only in the books, nor in the programs, nor not even in He Shelter. I was in the invisible gestures, in the threads of tenderness that followed weaving, one by one, without pause. That same one day, when Lily came home, she found Maya sitting on the He porch, looking at the sunset. He sat down beside her without saying nothing. They shared silence for long minutes as they used to do. Finally, Maya spoke. "Do you know what I think? That Rex didn't come for us to save him. He came to teach us how to save." Lily looked with a soft smile, eyes full of that brightness that only appears when the soul recognizes something true. They stayed so, seeing he darling to turn orange without need for more words. Because they both knew that what was important was fact. The world could still be hard, unfair, noisy. But there, in that corner, full of memories and barking, love continued being possible. And with that was enough. In the years following, the Rex's shelter remained an essential place in the community. They were no longer just rescuing animals, too. They trained caregivers and took in young people in situation of vulnerability. They offered workshops for schools and even assisted therapies for the elderly. There were who they only came to walk among the patios, to observe, to breathe differently, because something in that space, it invited calm, it invited presence. It was as if the spirit of each healed animal will remain in the air, caressing. Those who have just, they arrived. Lily directed his shelter with a calm, approachable leadership. He listened to everyone. Sometimes it was enough with his gaze to calm an argument or to give the green light to a new idea. I knew I couldn't do all alone, but also knew choose good with who to count on. Like his mother, like his companions, like everyone who has ever sat waiting next to a cage without demanding anything. In one of the anniversaries of the shelter, a special ceremony was organized. There was no press, no big speeches, just candles, photos, soft music, and dozens of people who had once been touched by that history. Lily, with a folder in her hands, climbed into a small, improvised platform. He read a letter he wrote to the 7 years. Shortly after meeting Rex, he said, "Dear scared dog, I don't know if you understand me, but I want you to be happy. If you want, we can be friends. I can wait." As she finished reading, her voice broke, but not out of sadness. It was gratitude, because that little girl still lived in she, and that dog, although was no longer there. He continued walking beside him. People applauded silently. Some were crying. Others, they hugged their own dogs, now part of their families. And everyone, in that instant, they knew they were there for more than just a story. They were there for a shared truth. That love, when it is real, leaves footprints that neither time can be deleted. With he passed. Of the time, Lily was writing less and living more. He no longer needed to record every breakthrough, every story, every daily miracle. He learned to trust that it essential is not forgotten. His focus was in training the new, teach them to look without judgment, to listen without hurry, to act without impose. One of its greatest pride was to see how ancient volunteers they opened shelters siblings in other cities, all inspired by the same philosophy. Some even carried Rex's name in small tributes, Casa Rex, Jardin de Rex, Camino Rex. And although each place had their style, they all shared something in common. Were spaces where people spoke short, he walked slowly, and believed, above all, in the possibility of healing. One afternoon, years after, while organized ancient files, Lily found the empty jar of peanut butter with the one who had everything started. It was kept in a box with drawings old, printed photos, and the patched-up stuffed animal Rex once. Hugged, he sat down in the ground, it held in his hands, and let it emotion the invaded, not out of nostalgia, but out of living memory. He remembered the first meeting, the wait, the fears, the small victories, and he understood something profound, that it was not she who rescued Rex, neither Maya nor he shelter. It was he who the chose, who, from his broken corner, accepted the gesture of a girl and opened the door to something much bigger. Closed the box carefully, the saved. Again in his shelf, and when he went out to the yard, he petted a newborn puppy arrived that still trembled. "We have time," he whispered, and the cycle once again began again. With the years, the Rex's story stopped being told as an anecdote. It became in a way of being in the world. In every shelter he inspired. In every child he learned to accompany instead of checking. In every dog he found a new beginning without having been forced to forget his past. It wasn't a magic formula. It was an invitation to look beyond the behaviors, to recognize that all of us, humans or animals, need to be seen with tenderness when we are broken, and that true, simple, repeated in hundreds of voices, sustained in thousands of gestures, became in movement, one that followed, growing without hurry but without pause. One who started with a children's drawing, a girl who knew how to wait, and a dog that even with fear, he dared to trust. The last time Lily spoke in public, it was in a rural school, in front of a dozen children sitting in the floor, listening attentively. There was no microphones, nor no cameras, no crowds, just her history, and a worn-out stuffed animal in his hands. He told everything as if it were a story, with pauses, with silences, with the intact love of someone who never stopped being the girl who drew a heart for a sad dog. In the end, one of the children raised his hand and asked, "And what passed with Rex after?" He closed the eyes, Lily said, looked, smiled, and replied, "He stayed here with us, in every hug, in every wait, in every dog that trusts again, and so term he story, not with an end, but with a silent promise. Because there is stories that don't die. They just change shape, and they continue to heal one life at a time. If this story left something in you, help us make it go further. Share it with someone you truly love.